Hi everybody, I'm back out at the back today at my house. I'm not fishing today, I was fishing yesterday. I'll probably go tomorrow, but what I've come out here for, to show you a couple of things I've discovered probably about 2 years ago. And first thing I want to show you first is we all use, for all the people that use poles, right, they all use, when you're using a Dacron connector, you always have a loop and you loop it over, and then what you do is you put it on the Dacron connector and you put it tight. But a lot of people are finding, as they get older, even me even, trying to pull that back off that loop, off that Dacron connector is really hard. So what I've decided to do, I've now put a float stop. I've got the line and the loop which goes on the Dacron connector, and I've also got a float stop. And what I'll do now, to make my life easier, if you've got little fat fingers or your fingers get cold in the winter and you can't grip the line properly, all I've done, I've discovered that if I pull that, I don't know if you can just about see it, if I pull that loop, that stop, onto that loop there, I'll bring it up close to the camera so you can see it. And then what we do then, if that's the Dacron connector, you put that through the hole there, and all you do then is pull the loop, pull the band, the float stop rather, onto the Dacron, as you can see. So I ain't got my reading glasses on, so you pull that onto the Dacron. There you go, and that is on there nice and easy. That ain't never going to come off there when it's up against the knot, and I find that's a lot easier to use when you're pole fishing than messing around with a loop, because when you've got a loop on there, you've got to then try and fiddle it and push the line up to try and get the loop off, and sometimes it's hard. You can also do a double loop where you cut the top section off and you get two little tags, and you can pull the tags and pull them down. That takes your loop off, right? But to me that's a lot of hassle, because when it's cold or you've got dodgy fingers or you're old and you can't grip anything like a tiny bit of line, I find that's a lot easier to do. So all you got to do, that's never going to come off there. And all you do then, you just grab hold of the little stop, pull it down, and it's off. It's that simple. And that's the way I use it. Another thing I discovered when I was fishing the pole, this was probably about 18 months ago, we always use like backstops above the float, as you can see. And what we use that for is mainly for the wind. If you've got a strong wind coming, when your float's sitting in the water, when that's dangling down like that, you can then just, that stops the wind blowing your line around and pulling your float apart about. And then just by mistake one day, when that was down a bit lower to my float, like that, top of my float, as that hit the water, because this is a 4x12, takes four number 8s, when I dropped that lead in the water, I found my float dipped. I thought, well, that's handy, because what I normally do is when it's a bit windy and choppy, I always fish with all the bristles sticking out, the whole of the bristle. And when I dropped that in the water like them two shot, my float dropped slightly bit. So I thought, and it disappeared. I thought, well, that must be the shot above the float doing that. So what I've done, I brought it back in, and what I've done then is I pulled the shot back up the line, and I pulled one completely out the way and left one down there. And I left it a bit closer to the top of the float. So I dropped my float back in, lowered it down, and as that lead, that little cube, hit the water, the float dipped. And instead of having a full bristle sticking out, I had about 1/4 of an inch, which I thought that was brilliant. And that saves adding shot on your line down the bottom. So then what I've done again, I brought it back in, and then I brought the shot right the way down the little cube, right up close to the bristle, and then dropped it in. And all of a sudden, the float went down, and all I had was a 1/4 of an inch sticking out. I thought that's really handy. So if I want a short bristle sticking out or a long bristle, I can move the shot backwards and forwards. If you've got a heavier float on and you've got 3 or 4 cubes at the top, you can bring 2 down to get it how you want it. And if you don't want them there at all you've got to do is bring them completely out the way up to your Dacron connector. But if the water's choppy and rough, then obviously I use it that way, like a lot of people do. I have 2 on there, 2 number 8s there, and all that does, it just hangs in the air. It stops the wind blowing it around, and it does, you know, what you're supposed to do, which is brilliant. But putting that shot down towards that bristle actually makes things so much easier for me. Anyway, that's what I've done, and I hope that's some interest to you. But give it a go when you're out there next. But anyway, getting back to the bait side of it, it's now that time of year. We're all using maggots and casters and things like that. A lot of the lakes where I fish anyway, at my club, on my water, we just don't bother using the pellet. We just call maggots and bread, or casters, or maybe a worm. But mainly it's maggots, casters and bread. So what I'll do now, all I'll do, instead of using ground bait in the winter, sometimes I use ground bait, but 9 times out of 10 I use bread. So all I'll do is put the bread in the blitzer, and I'll just blitz it all up. Right, now this is going to be noisy for a couple of seconds. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that. Blitz that right up. And then what I'll do then is I'll take that out, put that in there, riddle that through, take all the big bits out, and then what I'll do, I can put that back in the blender, and then I can blend it again. But there you go, end up with a nice load of flake like that. And all I'll do is put that in the pole cup or the cupping kit, and as before I put it out, I'll just dip a bit of water in it, drop it in the water so it goes a bit damp, and you'll find that sinks really nicely around your float. And because it's nice and bright and white, it brings the fish in really quick, especially the roach. If you're fishing for roach and skimmers and bream, that's what I use in the winter. I'll have probably a single red maggot on, and then either that or a piece of tiny piece of flake bread, and that's all I use during the winter. And that's what I've been having my fish on anyway. But I hope that's of interest to you. But give that a go. As I said, if you've got dodgy fingers and you can't grip the line properly, try that float stop just below the loop, and all you got to do is put your Dacron connector through there, pull that float stop nice and tight up against the knot on the Dacron connector. It ain't never coming off. That is staying there, and you can get them anywhere. I'll get mine on eBay. I'll get 72 in a pack for about £4, rather than pay fortunes in a tackle shop. But that's up to you what you do. But yeah, that's all I use, and that makes my life easier. No matter how cold it gets, I can pull that band, that little float stop down, with not an issue at all when it's on the pole. And that's all I use. And as I said about the back shot as well, where I've got 2 back shot at the back, it just made things so easy for me rather than putting it on the line. Anyway, I hope that's an interest here, and if it is, happy days.